Welcome, everyone. So my name's Matt Clayton, and as was just introed, I'm actually a coder. And so what am I doing in social? We ended up here by mistake, really. We launched the company just over 18 months ago, and turns out Google didn't work so well for audio content, which is what we specialize in. But social does. So what we've been doing over the last 2 years is kind of optimizing how we think about social and why and how we redesign around social. And what I'm going to be talking to you today about is how we've done that, the tricks we use, what you guys can use in your sites, and how to optimize for, well, basically traffic. So what is social? Let's try and forget everything here. Let's start from the beginning. Social is a fundamentally new way of thinking about how you build things online. Recommend me a film. People search for two things. They search for factual things, and they search for suggestions, things which are suggestive. A film is, well, it's personal. A fact like, where is this city? Or give me a map of this. That's factual. Google can solve the facts easily. That's a solved problem. But how do you solve the personal problems? And this is where social fits in. This is where things like Facebook and Twitter can absolutely dominate. So let's have a look at relationships, because this is where social starts. Every relationship you have, whether that's with a person or a brand, you can divide it into two axes. How long you've known somebody, whether it's for a short or a long time, and how well you know them, whether it's formal or intimate. So people like your friends and your family, that's long, intimate relationships. Short and intimate relationships are kind of one-night stands, that kind of thing. Short and formal relationships, like your pizza delivery boy, the guy who kind of rocks up on the door, knocks, gives you the pizza, and then disappears again. But it's a relationship nonetheless, and this is where your brands sit. Then you have the more formal but long-term work colleagues, that kind of stuff. So what you need to think about is, where do you guys fit on this? Where does your brand sit? And it's in that bottom left quadrant. By the way, guys, can you start the timer? But what social does is, what we have to think about is, where is the circle of trust? What do you as a person trust to make decisions and make recommendations towards you? And that's not the bottom left. That is the top right. That's your friends and your family. So what we need to do with social, and what social fundamentally achieves, is we take that top right quadrant and we actually make hooks around to certain areas. So your friends and your family will make recommendations of who you should go out to date with. They'll recommend a brand. They'll say, you should buy this Coke, or you should go to this city, you will love it. They'll recommend where you go and work. And conversations like this go on day in and day out on social networks. This is how social works, and this is how social drives new thoughts, new ideas, and new engagements. Search to date can't solve this problem. It doesn't know you. So we're here in Seattle. I'm a foreigner, obviously I'm British. I don't know Seattle. I could go into Google, I could search for good restaurants to see in Seattle. And you know what, it throws up a couple of things. But what's more interesting is talking to my friends in Seattle, saying what do they recommend. This is interesting because they know me, I'm an individual, I'm not a machine, I'm not an algorithm. They know my tastes and my favorites, and what I like. So when you think about a social network, we have three elements, essentially. We have the identity, which is me, and then on top of that, my identity is also comprised of any badges, awards, the whole ecosystem of what you are. So not only do we have yourself, we have your friends. That's actually part of your identity. And this is important to consider. Then we have the community. That's basically the rest of the ecosystem. That's you guys in this situation here. And what everybody does to date is they do distribution. They take themselves and they shout, and you broadcast to the audience. That's what most brands want to achieve. The problem with this is it doesn't really work, or it works for a short period of time. It sucks. Everyone leaves. They bugger off and don't come back. But this is where it gets really interesting. And the guys who are cracking social, this is what they are doing. You have to think about consumption as well as distribution. When you do tests on this stuff, what you find is that people who consume more distribute more, and people who distribute more also consume more. It's kind of hard to prove, but you can do it. Once you get this concept into your head, and once you get it working on a site, what you find is that this process accelerates and just keeps accelerating and accelerating. And your retention and your growth go through the roof. And we're going to go through some of the metrics and how we do this later on. But what you need to think about is actually how can we start this? And most people start by the distribution, and what you actually need to do is start by the consumption. So famous, pretty bad example is Google reviews. Like, this is a good example of how not to do things like this. Like rating and reviews, people have tried before. People consume, and therefore they read it, and therefore they're more likely to write a review, and then people write reviews, and therefore they're more likely to read. It doesn't really work in this kind of sense. The reason is these people here don't know me. These are other people in that bottom left quadrant who I've just had an informal short relationship with, albeit seeing them on a page. This is not social. This is what people are currently trying to do. Right, so let's go back to basics. Let's think about the social graph. The social graph is a group of people known as nodes, and they're joined by edges. This links them together. This is the graph. This is my friends. Then we have another object, a photo. Simple enough. Photos, if it clicks, can be uploaded by somebody. This is a different type of edge. It's one way. It's not two-way like friendship. And people can comment and like on stuff. Pretty simple, right? This is kind of the core concepts, what you need to be thinking about when you build this stuff. And we'll go through why later. So Facebook, just over a year ago, made a pretty unique extension to this idea. And the idea was the open graph. And that was to say that, like, they control these objects, but why don't we put your site on there? And why don't we say that, you know what, people can like that as well? So this gives you a new way of getting your content into their site and their distribution mechanism. They know that graph, and they know that top right quadrant better than any of your sites probably do. That's what they specialize in, and that's what they bring to the table. You've just got to learn how to leverage that. So we call this creating edges. Like is one type of edge, comment is another, share is another, send is another, upload is another. So how do we do this? We all kind of know that people are doing this, but really, you've got to kind of try and understand why, but before we do why, let's try and do how. So each page in the web has meta tags. There's nothing complicated here. Is this scaring anybody in the level of code? No. So meta tags and SEO have a bit of a rough history, to say the least. But for social, this is key. If you do not put meta tags, it will not survive. All this does is tell any site, not just including Facebook, what this page is about. In this case, it's a movie, it's The Rock. Title, The Rock, type, movie. Not complicated. It has a URL. It happens to be the URL where we're hosting this file, in this case, IMDb. It has an image. Stuff is better with images. Got to give it one of those. Site name, IMDb. Simple. FB admins. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. Who actually has FB admins installed on their site here today? Can you raise your hands? OK. You guys are doing a good job. The rest of you need to figure out why you need to add this. And even if you're not attempting to do social, you need to add this. If you take anything away from this presentation today, add that on your site. And we'll go through why. Description as well, simple. We just actually copy our meta descriptions for this, pretty much. So once you get those tags on there, go to this URL, lint it. Linting is the idea of saying, give me an idea, show me what Facebook sees when they see this page. So this is one of our pages. This guy is one of my co-founders, one of the guys I work with. The site, the URLs, picture, description. An app ID, that's our app ID. Nothing too amazing, but this does give you the ability to double check that things are going OK. And when you mess up, say you put in the wrong image, run it through this and it'll clear it all out. It'll start afresh again. There are a couple of limitations that you should be aware of. If you do a title or an image, they get locked after a certain number of edges, like likes are created against them. I believe the number's not that high at the moment, but try and get it right in the first place. So a couple of quick tips with regards to tagging. And I've just murdered multiple kittens here. I'm sorry. You'll kill me later. You got the white sheet out already. One of the key things to remember is that we went through this social era a while back where people were liking and sharing actions. They were saying that I've just got 1,000 banana points, and this got social a very bad name. Like, as your friend, I don't care that you just got 1,000 monkey nuts. I really don't give a damn. Or that you've got so many crops within Farmville. So what gets really interesting is when you actually don't use actions and you use objects. Think of these things as objects like, I don't know, a pair of shoes, a really cool piece of music. If I share a piece of music with you, you can reshare that on, and you get this compounding effect. One of the great kind of ways of thinking about this, what we'll share, what we generally think of it as is, if I give you a free T-shirt with this on it, will you wear it? That's quite a good indicator whether it will share successfully or not, because Remember, coming back to this identity principle, if you share something, it goes on your profile, it's part of your identity, and people care about their identities online. So think about things in terms of the t-shirt test. If you hand them out in the street, will you see people coming back the other way wearing your t-shirt? Secondly, there's a secret admin panel. I'll show you guys this in a bit. Top tip, don't use article. You guys, I'm sure, all run blogs. How many of you put like buttons on that and tagged it with article? I'm sure there's a couple of you in here. Don't do it. They actually hinder that internally within their systems, although they don't officially mention it very far. It stops you from being able to repost that content. And we'll go through reposting a bit. Admins, basically, if you put that tag on there, the one I mentioned earlier about FB admins, and list your admins, you can get to this. And this is where stuff gets really cool. This page is available by just clicking on the admin page when you put a like button on. And what this does is it gives you a way of recommunicating to everybody who just liked your content. I can now directly target and message you and say, hello, do you fancy this? Or do you want to check out these new pair of shoes or this new piece of content? It gives me a way of keeping that conversation going. So we've talked about objects. Edges are where it gets really interesting. So like is the edge everybody just went and slapped on their website. This is not social, but this is part of social. Facebook have essentially commoditized a lot of what they do by, they provided a like button, and I'm sorry for this, it's a really bad example of it. We don't have the faces underneath it. But by putting the faces underneath it, what they do is they make your brand, which that like button is associated with the friends you know and the people you trust together. So they basically took your friends and bolted them to your brand. This makes that content more engaging for you, and actually massively drives up the likelihood of somebody clicking that. This is kind of helpful, and we'll go through why in a bit, because it drives traffic, essentially. Don't use the iPhone version. It doesn't do cool stuff like popping down and allowing somebody to put a comment. Something's engaging when a comment's on there because it comes back to you and looks and sounds personal. It's not a one-liner, so-and-so has liked this, so-and-so has liked that. That's kind of boring. If you allow them to put a comment, they will, and they'll say why. And if it's an object, they'll say why they like that object. If it's an action, they'll kind of say, yes, great, I got 100 points. It doesn't really work. Objects work. So, sorry to jump into code. We knew we were going to get there. I'm putting this up here because it will be on my GitHub profile, and there's a link at the bottom. And the reason it's coming up is because if you do this one and not the one Facebook say, you'll get really good analytics out of it, and you guys love the analytics. What this is doing is put the like button wherever the hell you want a like button on your site. Put this big block at the bottom of the page. Woo. Went backwards there. Secondly, the interesting one is myref, like putting a reference on there. This is cool because it allows you to do the full funnel tracking we were talking about before. This allows you to say, somebody liked this button, and it comes back into your site as a referrer with that reference attached to it. We can now track the whole way through. So is anybody actually using Track Social yet? Anybody? 1, 2. I was hoping for 3. Oh, well. So we've gone through this. More kittens have been slaughtered by Rand. They seem to have weightings internally within their algorithm. Certain things like XFML, they seem to like it more. By weightings, I mean it shows up more in the newsfeed. And at the end of the day, you want distribution. Commenting, it's got cleaner UI. Don't use their code, it sucks. Use the one I just showed you. The main reason is blocking. So what I mean by blocking is your page load goes like this, waits for the like button, then goes like this. In this case, with this stuff, all the way down, and the like button appears when it's ready. The users get to the content faster. At the end of the day, we want a cool user experience. This is a really interesting one. The like button doesn't have to be on the page. It doesn't have to like the page you're currently on. The reason this is quite interesting is, say, for example, you were an e-commerce retailer and you had a bunch of iPods on sale. What you can do is you cannot like a particular iPod. You could like the brand Apple. The reason this is so powerful is because Apple released new products. When new products comes out, that now gives you a reason to communicate back with those users who liked Apple in the first place because they bought an iPod or they were alongside it. This means that people generally won't buy the same product twice, but they will buy from the same brand. So you're actually engaging in conversation with them now over a brand they actually bought or they liked. So it's not a one-time shot like see what comes into the newsfeed. You're actually opening up a long-time dialogue with them. We do this on our site. We launched about 18 months ago. We have now over 100,000 Facebook pages we manage. And that's escalating by about 20% a month. We do audio. We have genres. Whenever a new genre comes along, we create a page for it. People can like that page, and we aggregate them together. As soon as when it passes our algorithm test, piece of content comes along, which is really cool, we share it with everybody who liked that genre. So we're now massively bulking up likes across hundreds of thousands of pages. Tracking them. It's simple with this code. Try it. So this is kind of a bonus tip, and this is kind of one which freaks the ad guys out, and they get a little bit excited about this. So if you put the like button on your page, even if you don't care about social, put it on there and hide it down at the bottom. And then if you go within the insights, and this is just facebook.com/insights, and you've included that FB admins tag at the top. Nothing too complicated. It's one line. What we can now do is tell you the exact demographics of everybody who visited your website, whether they were signed in or signed out. All they have to be is signed into Facebook. And let's face it, 50% of people daily return to Facebook. The other guys are still logged into Facebook. They just haven't logged out. So, I mean, do you guys need conversion analytics? Do you need demographics? It's pretty easy to get it, and it's accurate. It's not like Comcast where they're sampling. We have a sample of whoever's logged into Facebook. For us, is about 80% of our traffic. Send. This was their next kind of arsenal. It's crap. It's awful for us. Conversion rates suck. Here's the code for it. Just put send equals true. And here's why. 1.8 million impressions converts to 187 visitors. That for us is basically, it's not worth 50 pixels on the page. It really isn't. So we've tried it. We can't get that to work well. We've moved it. We've tried faces. We've tried everything. The reason is that it's a one-to-one communication channel. When I click send, I send it to a person. They may or may not open it. And then even if they do, you're on a losing streak from the start. Oh, one thing they can do, by the way, is they can send to groups. In our testing, nobody does. So a couple of send tips. Basically, click-through rates are crap. Don't expect good results. We really have not been impressed with it. Share. As I say, we're going to go through these one at a time. This is the last one. But do you guys use this? Who actually bolted this on the site? Because I'm sure loads of you have. Right. Is it exactly this version? Does it look like this? Because if it does, get rid of it. There's a new version which came out about, Alex will probably correct me on this, I think it's about five months ago. We're seeing significantly better conversions on this, and I mean insanely good conversions. Why this is interesting is we can now control exactly the copy, the image. We can suggest that the user puts a message alongside it. And because we can control this, we can optimize it. And because we can optimize it, we can drive page views, and we can drive conversions back to us. And at the end of the day, we care about page views. We are an ad-driven business, and we get paid. My salary gets paid on a CPM basis, the number of people who see our site. So this isn't too complicated. Top tip, get rid of actions. Like, they give you the ability to set actions, and what actions do is they appear underneath, and they allow you to do something different to the feed item when it appears. So you can like, you can comment, and you can share normally. If you put an action on there and a link, it just appears as a link. Share will disappear. Users love resharing stuff if you've got good content, and if you force it and say, come back to my site like we have done in this example, they won't. It's far better to share and get somebody else to do it. It's far better to get the repercussions, sorry. So as you can see from this, it's a couple of lines of JavaScript. It's not too long. You guys really should actually look at this stuff. And again, what's more interesting with this is we can actually track the number of people who clicked publish. That's actually the number of people who actually put that on their Facebook feed, not went to the dialog. That's number of physical publishers. On top of that, we can include the rel tag. We can control the URL as we want. We can use this all the way through our conversion funnel, from clicking the button on our page to activate that JavaScript, all the way through to a conversion at the far end from one of their friends coming to the site. So a couple of quick things. Don't use action links. Get rid of the share one. It works for logged out users. They will just be asked to log in to Facebook. You don't need to worry about this stuff with this one. And I'm going to be talking a bit later about touch points. Touch points are something which we use all over the site, and it's massively powerful, and as far as I can tell, very underused within the industry. So EdgeRank. We do all this because of one thing and one thing only. We care about EdgeRank. EdgeRank is a formula. Sorry for those guys who don't do maths. But essentially, do you remember all those edges that I was saying we were creating with the share, the like, and the comment? What it does is Facebook assigns a weight to each one of those which points to one of these pages. And then they multiply that by a decaying factor. So the older it is, the less likely it is to show up. And then they multiply that by the affinity. This is an internal measure in their system about how close you are to that user. If this is somebody you stalk, for example, and you go to their page regularly, your affinity with them will be far higher. And therefore, what content they do is more likely to show up in your feed. So they're essentially optimizing their entire site based around this concept, that you're more engaged with certain users, therefore why don't we show those users to you, and therefore drive the retention, and therefore the growth. So what you need to think about is, how do we drive more edges, essentially, and how do we drive higher quality edges? Certain edges, like comment, is higher than share. Create seems to be higher than share, which seems to be higher than comment, which seems to be higher than like. I can't prove these. These are just our own internal tests, and I'm sure Alex from Facebook, who was here earlier, will probably know otherwise, but I've tried to get the numbers out of them, and they won't tell us. The hard one is trying to drive the infinity. Don't try and change that. It's almost impossible. But the really interesting one is you can reduce the time period of the activity. So what you can do is get a whole bunch of people to like stuff, comment on stuff, and share stuff within a very short period of time. And if you do this, then the edge rank goes higher, and therefore it gets higher within the news feed. Therefore, more people comment on it, more people like on it, and it gets higher and higher and keeps going. You also see a very similar technique happening within Twitter if you look at the trending topics. And on several occasions, we've been seen to be gaming those and getting into the top few, well, getting into the top trending topic. So this is great. I mean, creating edges is great. We get newsfeed items, but you guys care about measuring this stuff, so how do we do it? If you put that admin tag on there, the FBI admins, and you go to this website, facebook.com/insights, you can validate your domain and say, I own it. Once you own your domain, you can get some really interesting data out of it. And this is, at the end of the day, what we care about. Nothing else, just driving people to the site. So this is pretty typical data. This is our data. It's a few months old. But to give you an idea, we have never paid for a single ad impression, not a single one. We're now driving, and these are old figures. These are 2 months old, and we've pretty much doubled down since then. We're doing, and it's also about 50% of our traffic, we're now doing over 100 million impressions within Facebook without paying a single cent. And that converts at around about, we're actually now up to about a 1% conversion rate back into our site on that. And the interesting thing with this is not normal traffic. This is traffic which is deeply engaged with whoever created that story. So somebody creates a story or an item within Facebook. The user clicks on that, they come to our site. We've already got a pre-prepared experience for them when they land. And that experience is personalized just to them, to tailor them to get the best possible experience out of their time on our site. So we see typically, for every single like action, we do about 24,000. At the end of the day, they drive about 16,000 people to the site. So for everybody who clicks like, just less than one person, about 0.8 people rock up to the site and sort of visit. That's not too interesting, but then we get this long-term advantage that because they're liking and they keep that connection, they never disconnect. We can keep the communication open with them, and we can bring them back later on. But the really interesting one is share. For everybody who shares something to our site, 6.1 new people turn up to the site. And the nice thing about this is they land on the page where they click the share button. This gives our optimizing guys, it's really easy to optimize for growth. All they do is they have to say, for each user, we need to get more than 1 in 6 of them to click that share button. Once we get that, we see exponential growth. And we do. We grow around about 20% every single month. And we've held that now for 18 months. And we've only missed once. We missed in December when everybody was off for Christmas. And we hit, I think, 4% that month. So this stuff grows. It works. I mean, we see massive traffic. To give you an idea, search for us is 8%. If, never mind Panda, if Google disappeared, we wouldn't even notice the drop in traffic. So I told you about that tracking code earlier. So this is where it gets really interesting. What we can do with that code is it will turn up in your Google Analytics. I'm assuming you guys have Google Analytics installed. So our social engagement, the guys who actually come and click like, isn't that high. But I was talking earlier about the consumption distribution acceleration, and we see that people who distribute more consume more. One of the subtle facts on this slide is what we see is, Users who are willing to share stuff, and this is kind of a causality problem, so it's kind of hard to prove. But the guys who share stuff stick around for 45 minutes a visit. That's longer than you guys are going to be listening to me here today. And the guys who don't, we're doing pretty well. We're doing 12 minutes. But the reason that's so high is because when they land, they have their own personal experience. And that experience is, what did your friends do here? And they go and dig around, and they go and look at it, and they go and check out the same music their friends did. But they stick. So again, here we go. This gives you a quick breakdown. And the only reason I include this is because of one fact. Google +1 seems to have done pretty well this last month. They've actually got to about 50% of the volume of like or share. And this is people clicking the button. For us, this has been a bit of a revelation, so we're kind of rethinking how we deal with this. You also get to see which pages are doing well. So for us, we can see that Carl Cox here did 126 shares, he did 90 likes, he did 29 +1s, 18 tweets, 198 unlikes. He might be gaming the system in this case by clicking like and unlike. He is, or his manager is. But yeah, this tells us the content which people love, and therefore the best content on our site. And this is the content we're going to focus on. So you get this. This is kind of like what most people are doing today, or what they're trying to do. The next level is platform. And this is where you can actually make the most out of everything. So there's 3 stages to this. The first one is authenticate. Alex mentioned this before, and really, this is kind of one of the most crucial things to take away. Once somebody connects to your site with Facebook, they auto-log in when they come back. It's a subtle point, but a very important one. The reason is that every time they come back, even if they don't log in, they're auto-logged in. And therefore, that personalization is there pre-ready for them. And therefore, the engagement goes up, the retention goes up, and growth, profit. In our case, yes, we live off page views. But for most people, no. Permission dialog box. A couple of quick things to say about this. If you guys are trying to do this, Facebook's official stance is that every single permission you bolt on loses you 3% on the click-through rate. We're going to call bullshit on this one. Because by asking for email, we got 5% more people to click through. If I just ask for access to their account whenever I want and the ability to publish whatever I want to their stream, 62% said OK. If I ask for their email address and the ability to access their content whenever I want and the ability to publish anything to their stream I want to, 67% said yes. Users do weird stuff, but try it. Don't just believe what people say. This is the most important thing. Personalize your sites. If it's an e-commerce site, this can be done as well. Most e-commerce sites aren't bothering with this. This is one of our pages, and yeah, there's faces. It looks kind of subtle, but what is important is, this thing working? We're actually optimizing each page land. Every single impression you see on the site is optimized for you. These images down here aren't it's not an accident that Rob, one of my friends, is in that list of 8. If you look at this, 7,000 people have listened to this piece of content. The fact that his face is showing up there is very deliberate. We do that because then you see this content, you identify with him, and therefore you click play, you listen to it, you share it, you come back. Facebook do this everywhere. So this is a friend of mine's profile. 2 of my other friends are listed in the left-hand side. He has nearly 1,000 friends. Again, this is not coincidence. One of the newsfeed items of the 3 people he knew, the only guy who's my friend is the one who's shown up in text. Not a coincidence. This is actually driving and making me more engaged with this product. Top right, conversation between me and Nico. This is photos shared between the 2 of us. Again, this isn't coincidence. These things happen day in, day out on social sites. It's just very subtly worded. So artfinder.com is a site created by some great friends of mine, and they did something really smart. So in this situation, I'm not logged into Facebook. Well, I am logged into Facebook because I used it that morning a couple hours ago. I've never been to their site before, ever, not once. But what's kind of great about this is when you look at the bottom right, what they've done is they've embedded one of the social plugins. And this actually iframes directly through to Facebook. And this is now saying that friends of mine are sharing stuff and using this site. I can see what my friends are doing on that site without ever having to log in. This essentially gives me great confidence that this site is awesome, my friends are using it, and I'm going to check it out. I don't actually care that much about art, but now Bindy's using it, I'll go and have a look. So I'll sign up. This is available off Facebook, and it's a long line code, but it's one line of code. You can go and copy and paste it. These will all be available in slide deck afterwards. But this stuff is not hard. You could do this today. And what it does is it delivers that personal experience direct to the user who's on your site and has not yet converted. It's about taking those conversions and actually increasing them. Some of the stats we're seeing is that most people add kind of faces and their friends next to whatever object you want to convert to. It's about a 2 to 3x increase. So the next one is driving distribution. And the key to this is actually touch points. And this is a concept we rely on in our design the whole time. So when you come to a site like ours, and this is another one of our pages, and you're not logged in, you've never had an experience with us before, what we do is we place key points around the site. So the play buttons are one, the play all is another, embed, share, tweet, like, +1. And when users click these, particularly the Facebook ones, share and like, this is an indication that they are very engaged with the product, or they're not a normal user. They're actually exploring a little bit. And this is key to actually trying to upsell them to do something. So this is where we would spring a sign-up page, for example. But actually, we found that we can do this way better. And as I say, we do a lot of these things on Facebook. We do over 100 million of them now a month. And this is a touch point. This is probably the best touch point you will ever discover. If that is in your friend's newsfeed and you click through to my site, and what I can do is run one line of JavaScript, and I can detect if you are a new user who's signed up to Facebook because you've just come from Facebook. You've landed on our site. And you know what? I know you're connected to Facebook. I know you're not on our site, and I know a friend of yours is on our site because you've just clicked on their feed. So what I can do now is optimize the hell out of this. I can do a pop-up and say, you know what? It's better with friends. And oh, we use something called FacePal. You've got to go and check this out. It's really quite cool. And here are your friends who are using this site. Do you think you're going to sign up, or do you think you're going to pass? It turns out when we added this, and I'll leave you guys to kind of, well, let's have a quiz. What do you think happened to the bounce rate on this? Who thinks it went up? Who thinks it went down? How far do you think it went down? 10%? No? How far? 70. You're close. So the bounce rate dropped 55%. Signups went up 80%. 8-0. And that's not just off that one page, that's site-wide. And we actually drove people from doing 15 minutes to 45 minutes plus per visit. It works. The problem is now converting them to cash. For us, that's CPMs. It's easy. For you guys, you've got a harder problem. But thankfully, you've heard a lot of great guys telling you how to do this. Next slide. All right. Anyway, thank you for listening, and please get in touch. And if you've got any questions, let us know.